Hi everyone, welcome to Medicine Note YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to see about layers of scalp. First, it is a soft tissue covering the cranial vault of the scalp. It is a soft tissue which covers the cranial vault, which is it extends over anteriorly to the supraorbital margin, posterior to the external occipital protuberance up to superior nuchal line. On each side, superior temporal lines. In this image, you can clearly see anteriorly to the supraorbital margin above the eye, posteriorly to the external occipital protuberance. Here is the external occipital protuberance up to here. On each side, the superior nuchal line. This side as well as on that side, it is extended up to superior nuchal line. The scalp is made up of 5 layers, which is skin, connective tissue, apocranial neurosis, aponeurosis, and loose areolar tissue and pericranium. The word scalp, which is a mnemonic for the scalp 5 layers. S for skin, S for connective tissue, it is otherwise known as superficial fascia, and A for aponeurosis, and L for loose areolar tissue, and P for pericranium. The skin is adherent to the epicranial aponeurosis through a superficial fascia. The skin which is adherent to the epicranial aponeurosis, this layer which is the third layer, by a superficial fascia. These are the 3 layers which is explained here, which is the skin is adherent to the epicranial aponeurosis through superficial fascia. The skin contains hair and more number of sweat glands and sebaceous gland. It contains hair as well as more number of sweat glands and sebaceous gland. Generally, a skin contains hair, which we seen in the hand, it contains hair as well as for sweat glands because it sweats, and sebaceous gland. Now we will see the second layer, which is known as superficial fascia or connective tissue. C. In scalp, the word S and second letter is C. It contains more number of blood vessels, so it is known as connective tissue layer, and it is the thickest at center. It is thickest at center than periphery, and this layer connects the skin to the epicranial aponeurosis. This is the layer which connects the skin to the epicranial. It connects the first layer to the third layer. It is the middle layer which is present in between the skin and epicranial aponeurosis. This helps in supply of skin. The occipitofrontalis muscle has 2 bellies, the occipital belly as well as frontal belly. The occipital belly are small and separate, which arises from the lateral 2/3 of the superior nuchal line, and it is supplied by the posterior auricular branch of facial nerve. And the frontal belly, as the name suggests, it is occipitofrontal belly, means there is 2 bellies, which is occipital belly for occipito and frontal belly for frontalis. The occipital belly is small and separate, which arises from the lateral 2/3 of the superior nuchal line. This is the external occipital protuberance. It has superior nuchal line. From the lateral 2/3 and this 2/3, the occipital belly arises and the superior nuchal line. And this belly is supplied by the posterior auricular branch of the facial nerve. Now we will see about the frontal belly. The frontal belly are longer and wide and united at the median angle, and each belly arises from the skin of the upper eyelid. And this belly is supplied by the temporal branch of the facial nerve. Both the bellies are supplied by the facial nerve. The above, which is occipital belly, is supplied for the posterior auricular branch of the facial nerve. Here the temporal branch of the facial nerve is supplied as for frontal belly. And this muscle causes wrinkles in the forehead. This frontal belly causes wrinkles in the forehead. If we raise the eyebrow, there is wrinkles. This frontal belly is the cause of the wrinkles. This is the frontal belly, which is separate, which is not separate, which is united at the medial and which is longer and wider. And this is occipital belly, which is small and separate. Now we will see about the third layer, which is epicranial aponeurosis. A stand for, in scalp the word third, SCA. This is aponeurosis, which is generally known as epicranial aponeurosis. This layer is freely movable. The first layer, which is known as skin, and second layer, which is known as superficial fascia or connective tissue, and the third layer, which is known as epicranial aponeurosis. So this layer is freely movable pericranium along with the skin and superficial. With the above two layers, it is freely movable. Anteriorly receives insertion from the frontal belly and posteriorly by the occipital belly. In each side, it is attached to the superior nuchal line and sends down an expansion to an attached to zygomatic arch. In each side, it is attached to the superior nuchal line and it sends down the expansion to the zygomatic arch. Now the fourth layer, which is known as loose alveolar tissue, which is the fourth layer in SCALP. The L stands for loose alveolar tissue. It extends anteriorly to the eyelid because of the frontalis muscle and has no bony attachment. The posteriorly attaches to the superior nuchal line, on each side the superficial temporal line. This gives the passage to the emissary vein and connect the extracranial vein to the intracranial venous sinus. This extends anterior to the eyelid because of the frontalis muscle. Because the frontalis muscle is above the eyes, so it is connected to the eyelid and has no bony attachment. So posteriorly it is attached to the superior nuchal line on each side of the superficial temporal line. This gives a passage to the, on each side it is attached to the superficial temporal line, and this emissary vein, the normal function is to equalize the pressure between the extracranial venous sinus as well as intracranial dural sinus. So this gives passage to the emissary vein. It connects the extracranial veins to the intracranial veins. Now the last layer, which is the pericranium, the word SCALP. The P stands for pericranium. Loosely attaches to the bone, firmly attaches to the adherent to the sutures, and the sutural ligament bind to the pericranium to the endocranium. This is the layer, this is the diagram of the scalp, which contains the 5 layers. First layer, which is skin, which contains the hair as well as sebaceous gland. The superficial layer, which is down to it, and epicranial aponeurosis, which is freely movable along with the skin and the superficial fascia. And this is the loose connective tissue layer, which has the emissary veins, which has the intracranial vein and the extracranial veins to connect to each other. And these are the last layer, which is known as pericranium, which has a sutural ligament. And this is the emissary vein which is present, and this is the meningeal layer, this is the dural venous sinus. Now we will see about the blood supply of the scalp. In front of the auricle, it is supplied by supratrochlear, supraorbital and superficial temporal artery. And for the first two branches, the supratrochlear and supraorbital is the branch of the ophthalmic artery, which is the branch of internal carotid artery. This is the branch of ophthalmic artery, which is the branch of internal carotid artery, and the superficial temporal artery is the branch of external carotid artery. Behind the auricle is supplied by the posterior auricular artery and occipital artery. Thus, the scalp is richly supplied in the blood. In front of the auricle, there are 3 arteries, which is supratrochlear and supraorbital. These 2 branches are the branch of ophthalmic artery, which is the branch of ophthalmic artery is a branch of internal carotid artery. The superficial temporal artery is a branch of external carotid artery. In behind the auricle, the posterior artery or occipital artery. Thus, the scalp is richly supplied by the arteries. Now we will see the image, which is the supratrochlear and supraorbital, and these are the superficial temporal artery, which is in front of the auricle. Behind the auricle, posterior auricular artery as well as occipital artery. These 2 arteries are present behind the auricle. Now we will see the nerve supply of the scalp. The scalp is supplied by the 10 nerves, which are 5 sensory as well as 5 which is front of the auricle and the 5 which is behind the auricle. The 5 which is the front of the auricle are 4 sensory and 1 motor, and which is behind the auricle is also 4 sensory and 1 motor. For better understanding, I have just put in the tabular column in front of the auricle and behind the auricle. In front of the auricle, the sensory are supratrochlear, supraorbital, zygomaticotemporal and auriculotemporal. In behind the auricle, the sensory are posterior division of the greater auricular, lesser occipital nerve, greater occipital nerve, and third occipital nerve. These are the behind the auricle. The motor, which is the only one in both of them, are temporal branch of the facial nerve. Here, this is a posterior auricular branch of the facial nerve. Both are the branch of the facial nerve, which are 4 sensory as well as 1 motor in front of the auricle as well as in behind the auricle. This is the diagram of the nerve supply of the scalp in front of the auricle, which is supratrochlear, supraorbital, zygomatical, temporal and temporal branch. This is the only one which is the motor, and the remaining the auriculotemporal. These 4 are the sensory, and this is the posterior division of the greater auricular as well as posterior auricular nerve, lesser occipital nerve, greater occipital nerve, and third occipital nerve. Here the only sensory is posterior auricular and remaining are motor. Thank you. If you want to see about the venous drainage of the scalp, I have put a separated video on it. I will just provide it in the description box. Please do see it for the venous drainage of the scalp. Thank you. For more videos, please do like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel. If you have any doubt in it, please do comment it. Thank you.